Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com and by RockAuto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 147. And in our studio at MotorWeek headquarters today is road test producer Ben Davis.
Top of the morning to you, John.
Oh, boy. What'd you do? Have a late last night last night?
Call
Barely hear you there. Online content coordinator, Patrick Lucas.
Hello, everybody.
And, of course, our assistant producer, Greg Carlos.
Hey.
We've got a lightning round, a viewer question, as we always do. We'll see if anybody's got a rant and rave to rant and rave about. But first, on to some vehicles that we've had around the office lately, or at least have been driving on press events. Let's start with the 2017 Nissan Armada. Okay, this is the new Armada. It is no longer based on the Titan pickup truck. It is not built in the U.S. anymore. It is actually based on the global vehicle called the Nissan Patrol, which is a real rough and ready big off-roader. And Infiniti has been using this basic vehicle for their large SUV, the 80, for a while now. So anybody think this is a good move for them? I mean, it's in some aspects you could make the case that it's a more modern vehicle. But to me, it's kind of a throwback because the Patrol really hasn't had an all-new chassis in probably as long as the Titan had.
Granted, it's all new, but it looks like a 2012 QX56 that, later became the QX80 to me, so it looks a little dated.
I think it looks much more dated than that.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head there. I think it makes sense for Nissan. I mean, just stick to the one platform they use everywhere else. Most people who are going to buy it aren't going to notice anything.
No.
I think you mentioned it's big, it's rough and ready. I mean, it's all those things.
It hasn't taken any of the off-road characteristics away from it. It's actually added to it. Of course, that market really probably never takes these things on anything more than gravel roads anyway.
Yeah. Everything about it just looks dated, I think. I mean, the styling, while it's more modern than it was before, it's still like lagging behind others. The interior, I was kind of disappointed to see pretty much the same old layout that we'd seen before, and that goes for the QX80 as well. So,
info screen between the TAC and speedo was dated.
A lot of buttons there that are just kind of it makes everything convoluted. It's just if that's what you like, that's great. It's all still here. But if you're looking for something, or if you're looking for Nissan to take that next step, I don't think they have with the Armada.
I am assuming they didn't because of low volume and such and so forth. But, it's major competitors, mostly from GM, I guess, but also from Ford. I just think they're more modern, I guess. That's even though the Ford is kind of a reboot, the GM Chevrolet Tahoe just seems like a much more altogether vehicle.
Agreed there.
However, I will say that I thought it was back positive on the Armada. I did think it actually was pretty luxurious. It was nicely appointed on the inside.
Really nice seats. I remember.
If somebody was not, say, up on the latest vehicles and got in it, I actually think they'd be probably fairly impressed. I think it's more. It's the old Armada was in production so long. It's certainly a step up from that. It just may not be at the top of its class. I like the ride of it, too. I thought the engine was quite powerful. I mean, it had the V8 certainly
power's way up for sure.
It certainly was not a laggard in any aspect. So, you kind of caught betwixt and between. It's like if someone's in the market for a full-size truck-like, shall we say, SUV that has 3 rows and can carry just about anything you could possibly want because the roof is pretty tall on it. It's a pretty nice vehicle. I just don't necessarily think that it moves ahead. It doesn't move the class forward. It doesn't go past what's already available domestically.
Do you think it'll be cross-shopped with used QXs?
I know for a fact that one person, a friend of mine, is actually doing that right now, and he was not even aware that the Armada had changed, and they're looking at a 2-year-old QX. And I showed him this, and he said, basically it's the QX. I said, yes. He was very enthralled by it. He didn't think the interior upholstery and so forth were quite up to the Infiniti standard, which is probably right. But he was very impressed with it, and he's looking at it as not only as an alternative to a used QX, but also dollar for dollar, it's less expensive than the domestic competition. So he was saying, I can probably save $5,000 to $10,000 and get what I need to be able to tow. I think in his case it was a big boat.
Oh, wow.
So I think there's a market for it. Maybe it's for people looking for a big new vehicle that's got a good towing. But if I had my druthers, it probably wouldn't be my number one pick. But I'm glad they stayed in the market. I think that's another important thing. Obviously, Nissan wants to use all of their U.S. production for the Titan because it's going to come in so many varieties. But I'm glad they didn't leave the market, especially now since that whole big, full-size truck-like SUV market is getting kind of a revitalization because of cheap gas. So okay, it's a new entrant. It may not be our absolute favorite, but it's worth looking at, especially if you've got any kind of a budget. They're just starting to roll into dealerships now, and so that's the Nissan Armada for 2017. Okay, another car I think we probably have some reservations on is the new 2017 Buick LaCrosse, which from looking at it, it looks like a nice step forward. I don't know, Greg, you've spent more time with it than anybody else. What'd you think?
Yeah, I think it's an update in styling. It's not quite as drastic as I'm sure me as a younger person, I'm always expecting the next model of something to be drastically different.
Especially when they say it's a new generation.
Or much more modern, right. But I'm not really that target audience for them. I'm not the person who's buying that car. I think people who are looking for that car are going to find it very still classic looking, but also with modern touches. If you look at it from a profile, it looks a lot like a Impala, which is a good thing. I think it's a good looking car. It's got some sleek lines. They've reintroduced the tri-colored shield in the front, which I know Benny's pretty excited about.
It looked good to see.
Yeah, it really.
See it.
You know what? And looking back at LaCrosse's with that, just the plain chrome one, it adds some life to the front, which they need.
Buick is interesting that they are. They're a car company. They're known for their luxury cars. Their things go back to the Roadmaster back into the 50s. I mean, even further than that, it's a 100-and-some-year-old car company. This is their top sedan, and I think it's a very attractive car. I think the old LaCrosse was an attractive car. It's managed to stay modern. It has almost all the new safety features, including automatic braking, which it was actually one of the least expensive cars you could get full automatic braking on first. The problem with the car is not one of design. The problem is that the market for sedans in this country has pretty much evaporated. And when you go into a Buick showroom, you're there because of their SUVs. They've now got 3 of them, including the new one made in China. So you walk in, the Envision, they've got the Enclave, they've got the Encore. And you walk in there looking for that, and I wonder how many people are being drawn to their sedan side when, frankly, probably that's the best deal in the showroom. Yeah. So I'm glad they haven't backed out of the car market because let's see now, they still have that. They still have the Regal.
Cascada. Not the sedan, yeah.
And what was the small sedan? Help me.
The small sedan.
Yeah, the
Verano.
Verano,
yeah.
And that's being discontinued.
Right.
So anyway, they've stayed in the car market, but you do have to wonder if this car is not like a placeholder, and it's certainly not their future.
Well, we didn't even talk about driving it. It was actually shockingly good to drive. We were in
as all the recent Buicks have been.
We were in Portland, and I got to say, it was really comfortable and just amazingly quiet inside. And they have a new auto stop-start system. You get the V6. That's what you get when you buy a LaCrosse. They don't even give you the option to turn off auto stop start, which in pretty much every car that I'm aware of, you have that option. Yeah. But honestly, this was, if not the best, one of the best auto stop
pretty
start
invisible.
systems. If you didn't know it had it, you probably wouldn't even realize it. That 8-speed automatic transmission. It's really smooth, little slow to downshift, but this isn't a car that you're going to be driving very hard. So I came away really impressed with just the drive characteristics.
It has some of the styling of the Avignard.
Right, yeah, that won a lot of
Which is really one of the
awards.
most beautiful concepts in the last several
Right,
years.
yeah, they really hit that one out of the park, and there's definitely some cues there. The front grille is probably one of the biggest takeaways from there. But
And for those of you that don't watch MotorWeek every week, shame on you, but you should know that Buick actually designs cars these days for their Far East market as much as they do the American market. And actually, I think the LaCrosse will do very well there. That's where sedans are still king, and they like them long, low, and
going to do real well in
swoopy
China.
looking. Okay. A new car that I have seen at the auto shows, and Patrick has now driven. It's the first official spinoff of the new Genesis luxury brand, or Genesis Motor Company. This is the G90. So, Patrick, what was your takeaway?
My takeaway, I came back feeling very conflicted.
Very conflicted.
Because it was a very nice car, super nice car. Anything you could possibly want in a large luxury sedan. Super quiet, really great material quality.
Is this based on the same chassis as the Equus?
That's also the conflicted part, because they technically sell the G80 right now. That was technically their first Genesis car, and that was just a rebadged Hyundai Genesis. So now the Genesis G90 is supposedly replacing the Hyundai Equus, but an all-new vehicle, but I'm pretty sure it's a heavily modified Hyundai Equus chassis.
Some heritage there.
Right, but so yeah, like I said, really nice, everything you could want in a large luxury sedan. But so objectively, it is on par with the biggest Lexus, or maybe not an S-Class, not a 7 Series, which they said they wanted to go after. I don't think they're there yet, but certainly
How
a
about
Lexus.
an A8?
I don't think so either.
Okay, but that's their target.
That's their target, which is a good target to aim for.
I mean, if you think it's actually as good as an LS,
I was about to say,
right out of the box, that's pretty impressive.
It's on par with an LS. I'd say it probably beats a large, the RLX by Acura. It definitely beats it there. So objectively, very nice, but subjectively, if you start bringing your own opinions into it, I just don't think it's quite.
Where does it lack? Is it?
I don't know what it. I don't know what. Maybe
it's hard to put your finger on it. But what did it drive like? I mean, because obviously they're pushing this as a sporty, a big sporty sedan.
I would not call it sporty. It's very quiet, very smooth.
So definitely on the luxury side.
Oh, absolutely. Really great. They're doing an 8-speed automatic, smooth shifts.
6 and 8.
Yep. Twin turbo V6 and the 5-liter V8 that they've been using for a while, or Hyundai has been using for a while, and Kia. Really nice to drive, really quiet.
Let me approach this from another angle, because it kind of gets into our lightning round. Are you impressed with the effort, given this is their first true one to break away the new mark?
Absolutely, yeah. In that sense, it is definitely a success. I don't know if people are going to buy it. Not only actually buy the car, but if they're going to buy Genesis, the company, as a luxury company.
Let's get into that. And actually, that was our lightning round today. And I'll, before we hit the buzzer, to start the clock, the 2-minute countdown before you'll hear the bell from Patrick.
That's not the official
what
bell,
Patrick just said is exactly what I think I said, probably, and nearly word for word, when I went to the first Lexus LS preview. We were out in L.A. They flew us all in. We got to stand in a room, and we got to look at the car sitting about 20 feet away, and I don't think we got to actually go up and touch it. But I don't remember. It's been a long time. But all of us sat there and said, really nice car, but is anybody going to buy a Toyota product that's been rebadged and going after Mercedes? So having said that, giving those comments about Genesis, does it really make sense to spin off a new car brand just because you're trying to get to a new target audience. I mean, we have seen some successes like Lexus. We've seen some failures like Scion, interesting, both from Toyota. We've seen some, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. Acura and Infiniti would fall into that. So I guess, does it make sense that Hyundai is doing this? Why are they doing this? And why don't you start the bell, and let's see if anybody's got a clock and see if anybody's got any opinions.
I think we briefly touched on this maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago at this point. I think it's the natural progression for a successful car company. And I think Hyundai. In case you mean Hyundai. Hyundai, I think, has really, I don't think earned the right is the right word, but I think they've reached that point where it's like, what do we do next? And this is that next step. They've seen Toyota's been successful with it. They've seen other companies can be successful with it. And I think it's smart for them because they do make some nice vehicles. The Genesis is a very nice car, but I think one thing that holds it back is because it's badged as a Hyundai. Right. And if they can make a separation there where people see Genesis actually made a really nice name for itself as the car. And they actually, that was one where they had its own badge already, right? Yeah. They only had like one Hyundai badge on it maybe. So I think if they're officially trying to separate it from Hyundai. Not that, I mean, we know Hyundai's actually become a very reputable and solid brand.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of people who still see a Hyundai and think that's cheap.
I know a lot of Hyundai dealers sell very few Genesis because of that very fact. It's interesting that when the LS from Lexus was launched, or when Lexus was launched, it was in a day where the Germans that they were after, Mercedes and BMW particularly in their big cars, had priced themselves almost out of the U.S. market, and they undercut them very substantially with the LS. But the base price for this GS is $70,000. So I can't even say I think it is a bargain because I guess there's almost no options. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem to come out with that I've got to have it because it's the greatest buy on earth. Does anybody think that's smart or not smart?
Well, I got a question. When we had an Equus maybe a year or so ago, and I don't think any of us were enamored with it. No. We think the price for what you're getting with that car.
It was really cheap.
Do you think they've taken the next step and really kind of forgotten the previous Equus, or you still have that same feeling of...
Well, and that's what I was going to say earlier, is maybe it's just because I've driven so many Hyundai products and Kia products that I'm noticing a lot of the same switchgear and shared, buttons and stuff like that, and the look of like the gauge cluster and sometimes. So maybe I'm just noticing that in this car, and I should be able to separate the two, but I'm just still like, I've seen that in a
we've often talked about that when Lincoln has shared too many Ford buttons and Cadillac has shared too many Chevy buttons.
So that's why maybe I personally think that the G90 is still not quite there, but if somebody who's walking into a dealership and doesn't know a thing about it gets in there, they're going to be like, wow, this is really nice.
And they're talking about a full line of vehicles, 5 vehicles?
Yeah, they
want, or something like that?
I think they want, let's see, look at my notes. They want 6 vehicles by not one. They're planning on 6 vehicles by 2021. They're already working on the G70, which is going to be a 3 Series fighter. And then that's also going to underpin a crossover.
Right.
They want to do a bigger crossover than that. And then maybe a very small.
It's very difficult for a mainline brand, be it Hyundai or Ford or anyone else, to sell a pure luxury vehicle. People just don't have that mindset. And I guess in this was probably the smartest thing they possibly could have done without giving up on it altogether. To try and convince people that a whole new luxury brand is out there worth looking at, it's going to be very tough, but Lexus did it. And, and you have to say Acura and Infiniti have stayed in the game, so I wouldn't bet against them. And I think it was probably a good move. Ding, ding. All right, very good. Let's move on to our viewer question. This comes from Colin. Here we go. I've noticed that today's cars are opting for an electronic parking brake over a traditional foot or hand brake. My question is, in the event of a sudden brake failure, can you use an electronic parking brake as an emergency brake? We're talking about e-brakes here, like you can a hand brake. Can you even engage the electronic parking brake while the vehicle is in motion? If so, how safe is it? And what can you expect when you engage it? immediate stop, ABS stop, brakes lock up, whatever. I only ask this because they are using the term parking brake these days instead of emergency brake, which leads me to believe that there is a difference. Nobody's going to jump in first? All right. I will tell you, Colin, I called Pat Goss before the show to ask him. He says some of them will, if you pull them up at speed above 20 miles an hour or so, they will not engage at all. He said most of them, if you're at very slow speeds, will give you some braking. He, of course, then went on to say only a crazy person would pull it up at highway speeds, because if it did work, it would lock up your rear brakes and possibly send you into a spin. But in his experience, and I think ours too, most of them don't work or will not set in an up position if you're moving at any kind of speed, and won't even work. Now, on the other hand,
right? I've been told at one event, it was a Jag event on a track, and people were wondering about, because it was right around the time where they were really becoming prevalent,
right?
And somebody had asked, can you pull like a J-turn with it?
Right.
And one of their drivers, I believe, told me that if you held it up while you're driving, it would act as a traditional emergency brake.
But that's that case. That is probably not universal.
They may not do it anymore. It may have just been that model or just at that time. But that's what I was told.
Benny, you said you basically do that with almost every car we get in, just to see what happens.
I do. It's
like a good tester should.
It's a carryover from my teenage days. Yeah. But yeah, I have tried it in a lot of vehicles, and I've never had success.
I know that if you're going very slow speeds, like 3, 4, 5 miles an hour, it'll work.
I believe a couple of times.
I've done that myself.
Yeah, you'll feel a little resistance there, but usually I try it at speed, and it'll flash some kind of warning sign sometimes between in some screen or another, or make an audible noise. But yeah, there's nothing there. It doesn't work.
Patrick, ever tried?
No, I'm not that daring.
Now, I should also tell you, Colin, that Pat says that it has been decades since he's seen a car in his shop that had a total brake failure, because cars have dual braking circuits, sometimes 3 circuits. So the chances, unless you, for some reason, run completely out of hydraulic fluid, and at that point you'll get all kind of lights flashing on the dash, that the thing in the movies where they show you cutting a brake line.
Uh-oh.
And I did cut my phone off, I have to tell you, but it's ringing anyway. Basically, he feels that the likelihood of you actually needing that as an emergency brake is slim and none.
As a quick side note, I've also tried to put electronic shifters into park at highway speeds, and nothing happens.
Nothing happens. That's probably
that's
a good thing.
Smart.
Well, you never know, because I have kids, and kids do crazy stuff. While you're not paying attention, one could lean over and hit park, or especially in a Jaguar or Range Rover, it's real tempting to grab that rotary dial and do something with it, even as an adult, knowing I shouldn't. That's how I first tested
the rotary shifters.
So if I'm thinking about it, that there's a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old thinking about it, and they might do it. So.
And especially when you've got those little bitty e-brake levers, and sometimes they're right next to some other button that somebody, I've forgotten which one it was. There's something that I went to. Oh, I know what it was. It was wasn't it the Cascada that had the top mechanism right next to the E button? So if you go there to pull up, of course you theoretically wouldn't be driving very fast, but if you pulled up on the top button, you're right next to the brake button.
What was your plan if you managed to get into park at highway speed?
Maybe not highway speed, but 30, 35.
Well, did you think that one through before you did it?
Just to test to see what would happen if a young passenger were to do it while you're not looking.
Well, I've noticed in some of the e-shifters, especially the rotary ones, that when you're going, say, for either the manual setting or the snow setting, there's this human tendency to flip the dial back and forth, and you end up going too far, and you end up in park, and you flip it right out of it, and nothing happens. And I'm thinking, is this really, this gets back to the whole e-shifter thing. Are they really an improvement? Or is it just something for show?
That's a good segue into a rant rave.
I got
a problem with our long-term pilot shifter. I just hate that there's buttons. It's awful.
For those of you that haven't seen the 8-speed automatic shifter that's in the Pilot and also that Acura uses, it's a combination of, there's a button for park. There's a rocker, I don't know, what would you call it? Yeah. Basically something you pull back on, a button you'd pull back on for reverse. Then you've got a big button for drive.
It's slow to react. I have a habit of, and it's not a good one, of going from in a traditional shifter when I'm reversing, and then when I go to drive, I'll flip it into neutral for a second and then go to drive. Yeah. This thing, you have to be pretty much at a complete stop. Mm-hmm. Hit drive, and then you even got to wait like another beat until you can actually go. Like I'll be on the gas before it even engages, so it's kind of frustrating.
I think they're losing sight of the inherent benefits of electronic shifters too, is that they take up much less space.
That's supposed to be the whole thing.
Not in this case, though. It's huge.
Do you think, like in there, the Pilot, they're going for a design aesthetic, or was that supposed to be a functionality thing? Because it is just, it certainly looks cool, but it is just bizarre.
Cumbersome.
The standard transmission in the Pilot is the 6-speeds, and that's that's the more traditional handle with a Prendle, and I think that's the space, so they fit this in the space. Mm-hmm. It certainly doesn't need to take up that much space, and most manufacturers are telling us that one of the reasons they've gone to e-shifters is so they can free up console space. So they can use it for storage,
cubby holes underneath,
or whatever,
and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So I think that's probably the shifter that comes with the transmission at this point. But I can't say any of us are fans of. Every time I get in the Pilot, it's like you've got to relearn how to use it all over again. Anyway,
reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, so we could probably go on for an entire podcast about e-shifters and how we don't necessarily think they're a step forward. But we won't. We will bring to a close our podcast number 147. I want to thank everybody around the table today. Ben Davis, Patrick Lucas, Greg Carlos for basically taking part and giving us our wisdom. Also, audio engineer Jim Bigwood, who makes us sound good regardless. Podcast creator Bob Mixter. And, of course, Patrick Lucas is our podcast producer. And as I always say, the man with the bell. To all of you out there, thanks very much for listening to our podcast at MotorWeek. Thank you also for joining us on our television series, now in its 36th season, seen on public TV stations around the country and also on the Velocity cable channel. We hope you'll also go to our website, MotorWeek.org, where we've got lots of features that you won't necessarily see on the show itself. Our YouTube channel is up and active with, I lost count, hundreds and hundreds of road tests and all sorts of other features from the show. If you've got a computer or a TV, you can find us on MotorWeek, and we hope you will. I'm John Davis. For all of us, thanks for listening and watching to MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com and by RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at MotorWeek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.